My husband, Martin, lifted his champagne flute toward 300 guests and smiled the smile I had spent 40 years admiring before he said, A man doesn't build a successful firm by doing it alone. Though I'll admit, sometimes the hardest part isn't the work. It's coming home to someone who stopped growing alongside you." Light, well-timed laughter scattered through the ballroom of the Fairmont Royal York. I sat at table 4 with a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, feeling the heat rise into my face while the crystal chandeliers above me seemed to tilt slightly. Then my husband Martin looked directly at me and added, with a fond smile that would photograph beautifully, "But patience is its own kind of architecture." More laughter, warmer this time. And across the room, near the window overlooking Front Street, Dana Ashford smiled the slow, private smile of someone who already knew the ending. What neither of them knew was that inside the slim envelope beside my plate, I had placed something Martin would never have expected from the woman he had spent 2 years calling his homebody. In less than 10 minutes, I was going to hand that envelope to someone who would change the entire evening. If you have ever been told by someone who was supposed to love you that your quiet life was evidence of your smallness, I want you to stay with me tonight. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. People used to tell us we were the kind of couple that made marriage look worth choosing. Martin Rourke and Kathleen Rourke, 40 years together. 3 grown children. A house on Glen Lake Avenue in Toronto that I repainted myself twice. And a firm with Martin's name on the glass door and a photograph of us at his first job site still sitting on his desk. Or it used to sit there. When I met Martin, he was 24 years old and furious at the world in the particular way of talented men who haven't been discovered yet. He was doing residential drafting for a firm in Etobicoke, driving a used Civic with a cracked dashboard and eating dinner at his desk because he couldn't afford to waste the hour. I was a registered nurse working overnight shifts at Toronto Western. We met at a friend's kitchen party in Parkdale and argued about city planning until 3 in the morning, and then stood outside on the porch in January cold and kept arguing because neither of us wanted to stop. "You're the most opinionated woman I've ever met," he told me that night. I thought that was a compliment. For a long time, it genuinely was. Martin started his firm 11 years into our marriage, in a borrowed office above a print shop on Dundas Street. He had no money, 2 business contacts, and more ambition than sleep. I worked overnight shifts at the hospital and watched our children during the day and told our son James and our daughter Alice that their father was doing something important. Even on the nights, the important thing came home exhausted and barely spoke until the following morning. I had been offered a position in nursing management the year before Martin launched the firm. I turned it down. We talked about it together, rationally, calmly, the way we used to make every decision. Martin's business had no stable income yet. Someone needed to hold the household together. He said he would make it up to me. I believed him. I didn't realize then that belief can outlast its own evidence for a very long time. By the time Martin's firm became something real, by the time his name appeared on downtown condominiums and airport expansion plans and the Architectural Heritage Restoration Project that earned him a Governor General's Award nomination, I had become invisible in a way that was difficult to explain to people who saw us at charity dinners. Not unkind, exactly. Just overlooked, the way you stop noticing a familiar piece of furniture once it's been in the same place long enough. The comments started gradually. "You should come to the firm's client dinners more often, Kathy. Make an effort. I didn't realize you'd let your hair go gray. It's fine. Just unexpected." And once, while I was describing a new program I'd been helping coordinate at a community health center, Martin's phone rang and he answered it without excusing himself. When he came back to the table, he didn't ask where I'd left off. I noticed the change in him the way you notice winter coming in Ontario, not all at once, but in accumulation. The cologne first. Martin had worn the same cedar and green tea aftershave for 20 years. I used to buy it for him every Christmas. Then one September morning I walked into our bathroom, and the familiar bottle was gone, replaced by something heavier, darker. The kind of scent sold in a bottle that looks like architecture. Then the phone. We had always been casual about our phones around each other. Martin used to hand me his without hesitation when he was driving. Then, slowly, he didn't. The screen was always face down. It went with him to the bathroom. Once, late at night, I came downstairs for water and found him at the kitchen island, with the screen lighting up his face. And the expression he wore wasn't stress or work focus. It was pleasure. The soft, private pleasure people wear when they believe they are alone. He looked up. Something closed over his face immediately. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "No," I said. He put the phone in his pocket. "Try melatonin," he said, and walked past me toward the stairs. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that. The late nights followed. Then the conferences his assistant couldn't quite recall when I called to ask about travel arrangements. Then the gym membership. Martin, who had always said he didn't have patience for gyms, was suddenly going 4 mornings a week. New shirts appeared in his closet. He booked a teeth whitening appointment. Once, I saw him check his reflection in the window of a parked car while we walked to a restaurant, and he didn't notice me noticing. I told myself it was vanity. That men approaching 65 sometimes became frightened of what they saw in the mirror. I wanted very badly for that to be true. The first time I said anything, I asked simply, "Are you all right? You seem distracted." Martin looked at me as though I had said something irrational. "I'm running a firm, Kathleen. There's a lot happening." The second time, more directly, "Martin, is there someone else?" He set down his glass. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, then anger, and then something that settled into quiet contempt. "That's who you are now," he said, "after 40 years. That's the level we're operating at." And then he walked out of the room. And I sat at our kitchen table wondering whether I was losing my mind. I hadn't spoken to Heather Sinclair in 3 years. We had been close once through the years when the children were small, but life has a way of widening the distances between women who are busy keeping other people's lives running. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon from my car outside a grocery store in Bloor West Village, because somehow I couldn't make that call from inside the house. She answered on the second ring and said, before I had spoken more than my name, "Kathy, what happened?" That was enough. That was everything. We met at her kitchen table that Thursday with tea that went cold while I talked. Heather had spent 22 years as a forensic accountant before she retired, most of those years working on financial investigations that included divorce proceedings. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she didn't offer comfort first. She asked, "Do you have access to your financial accounts?" "Yes, they're joint." "Have you looked at them recently? Carefully?" I hadn't, not in years. What Heather showed me over the following 2 days, sitting together at her dining room table with printed statements and her reading glasses and her deeply professional calm, made me understand that what I had been feeling was not paranoia. It was accurate. Dinners at restaurants I hadn't been invited to, hotel charges within the city, and something that Heather found quietly, without comment, and placed in front of me without editorializing, a series of automatic payments to a serviced apartment building in Liberty Village. Monthly payments. 8 months running. I sat very still. "Her name is Dana Ashford," I said, because I had already known, somewhere beneath all the reasonable explanations I had been constructing. I had seen Dana at a firm function the previous spring. 20 years younger than me, sharp and easy and clearly brilliant, and the way Martin had introduced her. "Dana heads up our communication strategy," he'd said, his voice carrying that particular warmth he used only when someone mattered, had settled in my chest like a small cold thing I kept trying to dismiss. "He's paying for her apartment," I said. "With joint funds," said Heather. "Yes." There is a particular kind of silence inside a long marriage when it is ending. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just the slow recognition that the life you have been living exists mostly in your own understanding of it, and that the other person stopped living it with you some time ago without telling you. I thought about leaving quietly. I thought about calling Martin in and sitting him down at the kitchen table and saying, "I know. Let's be honest with each other, finally." Then Martin came home one evening glowing with something that had nothing to do with me, poured himself a scotch, and said, "I'm finalizing the program for the firm gala, 25 years. We're expecting 300 guests." I'll need you there, obviously. He talked about the venue, the catering, the remarks he planned to give. He talked about it the way someone talks about a performance they have been rehearsing. Every detail in its correct position. Every person assigned their role. He did not ask what I thought. He did not ask how I was. I asked very carefully, "Will Dana be there?" Martin looked up. Something moved through his face very fast, very controlled. "She manages firm communications, of course!" "I see," I said. He went upstairs 20 minutes later, and I sat alone, and I understood something. He was going to say something at that gala. Something public, designed to diminish me in front of his most important clients and keys, to shape the story of our marriage before he walked away from it. Men like Martin don't assemble 300 witnesses without a reason. I had spent most of 40 years learning the shape of silence from the inside. I decided I was done with it. My son James came by the weekend before the gala. He sat in the kitchen eating leftover butter chicken and watched me with the careful eyes he has always had. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking. Is Dad all right?" I looked at my son across the kitchen island. I had spent 40 years protecting the image of his father in ways I hadn't even consciously understood. I had smoothed and explained and reframed so seamlessly that even I sometimes forgot I was doing it. "I'm going to be all right," I said. "That's what I know for certain." He studied me for a long moment. "Then I'm coming to the gala." The Fairmont was beautiful the night of the firm's 25th anniversary. Champagne towers, string quartet, round tables with cream linen and white ranunculus centerpieces. Martin's clients and partners in the city's architectural community filled the room. Dana Ashford stood near the bar in a deep green dress, looking entirely at ease with where she was. When she saw me, she smiled. It was the kind of smile that contains a secret. I had arrived early and spoken with the event coordinator, a competent young woman named Carrie, who was delighted to accommodate a small addition to the evening program. A surprise tribute from the family, I had told her. A personal moment. Martin took the stage at 8:30 to sustained applause. He was very good on a stage. He always had been. The crowd responded to him the way crowds respond to men who have learned exactly how to take up space, warmly, instinctively, without quite knowing why. He spoke about the firm's history. He spoke about ambition and vision and the city he loved. He was gracious and funny, and I watched him from table 4 and felt something I had not expected. A clear, steady sadness. Not for what was coming. For what had once been real between us so long ago, before success taught him that I was no longer useful to his story. Then his tone shifted. Subtly at first. A joke about the unglamorous early years. "Fine." Then a gesture toward our table, a smile at me, and, "Behind every architect, there's someone at home making sure the recycling goes out." Light laughter. He kept going. 40 years with the same woman teaches you things. Mainly that she's very comfortable exactly where she is. More laughter, nervous now, uncertain. Some of us keep building. Others prefer the view from the kitchen window. Guests glanced at each other, then at me. My daughter Alice, 2 seats away, touched my arm. I could feel her distress. Martin raised his glass toward me. "To the women who hold down the fort. We couldn't have done it without you." Applause. Scattered. Uncomfortable. And Dana Ashford, near the window, smiled at me with the full confidence of someone who believes the competition has already conceded. I stood up. Not quickly. Not dramatically. I simply stood, picked up the envelope beside my plate, and walked toward the stage. Martin watched me approach with an expression I had never seen on his face in 40 years. Genuine uncertainty. I reached the podium and he leaned toward the microphone with easy confidence. "My wife, everyone. Applause." I placed my hand on his arm. "May I said quietly and nodded at the microphone. He could not refuse. Not there. Not in front of 300 people. He stepped back. I looked out at the room. Faces I had known for decades. Clients who had come to our house for dinner. Partners who had known us as a couple for 25 years. I took one slow breath. "Martin built something remarkable," I said. "I want everyone in this room to know that I mean that honestly." Warmth returned, relaxation. When Martin started this firm, We were living in a semi-detached house in Leslieville with one working burner on the stove. And 2 children under 5. I worked overnight shifts at Toronto Western while he drafted plans at the kitchen table position until 3 in the morning. I had worked 8 years toward, because we needed one of us to hold the household together, while he built something from nothing. Real silence now. I don't say that with resentment. I made that choice freely. But I want it to exist in this room tonight, alongside everything else, because the story of what he built is also the story of what I gave. And that story, of course, has been very quietly removed from his remarks for a very long time. I set the envelope on the podium. Martin suggested recently that I had become someone who preferred the view from the kitchen window. What he didn't know is that the view from my kitchen window includes our joint bank statements and 8 months of monthly payments to a serviced apartment in Liberty Village. In Dana Ashford's name. The room went completely still. Then a sharp intake of breath near the front. Then another. Martin's face drained of color so completely that he looked ill under the stage lights. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," I said, and I meant every word. "I'm here because for 2 years I was told I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, that I was too comfortable, too small, not growing alongside my husband. I want the 300 people in this room to know that I was not imagining anything at all." I stepped back from the microphone. Dana Ashford had gone completely still near the window. Every person within 10 feet of her had quietly turned to look. Martin stepped forward and said my name sharply. Just my name. No sentence after it, because there was no sentence available to him. James was already moving from his table toward the stage. Martin's senior partner, Jeffrey Baxter, a man who had known us both since the early 90s, stood slowly from his chair and looked at Martin with an expression that carried nothing sympathetic in it at all. "Martin," Jeffrey said quietly, "we'll speak Monday." I did not go home with Martin that night. James drove me to his apartment in the annex and made tea that I held without drinking, and for a long time neither of us spoke. Alice called at 11:30, crying, and I told her the truth, all of it, carefully and honestly, and she listened without interrupting. "Mum," she said when I finished, "I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." "You saw what he showed you," I said. "That's not the same thing as not seeing." The divorce took 8 months. Martin's firm survived, but not in the form he had built it. 2 major clients withdrew within weeks of the gala. Jeffrey Baxter and 2 other senior partners restructured and removed Martin from the founding designation during reorganization. It was done without public announcement, the way professional consequences usually are, but the effect was the same. Dana Ashford left the firm before the end of the month. I heard later that Martin had described his marriage to her in terms designed to make her patient, that the picture she had been given of me, of us, of his intentions, was another construction. That piece of information hurt in a way I hadn't anticipated, not for my sake, but for hers. Martin's particular talent had always been making each person feel like the one he was telling the truth to. I kept the house on Glen Lake Avenue. I went back to nursing, not clinical practice at my age, but a coordination role with a primary care network on Bloor Street that needed someone who understood both the system and the human beings moving through it. I accepted the advancement I had turned down 40 years ago, from a different door, at a different stage of my life. It fit. The first autumn after the gala, James and Alice came for Thanksgiving dinner, and we ate too much and argued pleasantly about a film they had both seen and disagreed about, and at some point I looked around my own table and felt something that took me a moment to name correctly. It was peace, plain, unremarkable, genuine peace. I thought about the woman sitting at table 4 in the Fairmont ballroom, watching her husband quietly remove her from his story in front of 300 witnesses. I thought about how long she had been practiced at staying quiet, how good she had become at holding her own pain so neatly that no one, including herself, had to look at it directly. There is a version of endurance that people praise in women. Patience, they call it. Devotion. And sometimes it truly is both of those things. But sometimes what looks like strength from the outside is simply the long-practiced habit of making yourself small enough that no one has to accommodate you. I stopped doing that, not all at once, not without fear, But I stopped. If you are watching this tonight, and you recognize something in this story, the slow erosion, the dismissal dressed up as concern, the way someone can make you feel grateful simply for being tolerated, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not too old to take up space again. You are not too quiet to have a voice worth hearing, and you were never weak for staying. But you are also never too far along to finally choose yourself, even now, even after everything. That choice gave me my life back. I believe it can do the same for you.